The grand obsidian oculus of the High Synod reflected the terror of 1,000 worlds, not in the panicked screams of the populace, but in the suffocating silence of those who ruled them. The chamber was a cavernous expanse of dark stone and bioluminescent veins, suspended high within the gravity well of the Dominion's capital station, a construct that had stood for 10,000 cycles as a monument to absolute authority. Now, the air within the chamber tasted of ozone and recycled fear. High Exarch Vox stood at the apex of the central dais, his four articulated hands gripping the railing until the chitinous plates of his knuckles threatened to fracture. Around him, the holographic projections of the Dominion's vast armada flickered and died, one by one, not because they were being destroyed in a hail of laser fire, but because they were simply ceasing to report. The silence from the void was absolute. It was a heavy, physical weight that pressed against the sensory organs of every counselor present, a crushing realization that the prey they had sought to consume had not only survived the attempt, but had traced the hunter back to its den. The vast circular room, usually a cacophony of political maneuvering and arrogant decrees regarding resource allocation, was now a tomb where the only sound was the low, rhythmic thrumming of the station's life support, sounding uncomfortably like the heartbeat of a dying god. "It does not decelerate," whispered Counselor Alara, her voice trembling as her multifaceted eyes remained locked on the primary tactical display. The screen, a massive sheet of suspended hard light, showed a trajectory that defied the established laws of propulsion. A single red vector cut through the intricate defensive webs of the Dominion like a heated needle through wax. The human vessel. It ignores the gravity wells of the moons. It ignores the minefields. It is not moving through space. It acts as if space is moving around it. "Vok, what have we done? What was the nature of the device we sent to their periphery?" Her question hung in the air, a rhetorical accusation that everyone knew the answer to but feared to articulate. The Dominion, in its endless hunger for organic slurry and heavy metals, had dispatched a Class 4 biophage, a planetary consumption engine, a bomb to eat, to a remote system on the edge of the galactic arm. The logic had been cold and bureaucratic. The system contained a water-rich world inhabited by a primitive, soft-skinned species that had barely mastered fission. The biophage was meant to dissolve the biosphere, harvest the carbon, and return the refined slurry to the Dominion's storehouses. It was a routine harvest, or so the actuaries had claimed. Vok turned slowly, his heavy ceremonial robes rustling like dry leaves. He looked at Alara, then at the gathered assembly of the galaxy's most powerful warlords and diplomats, seeing his own dread mirrored in their postures. "We sent a harvester," Vok rumbled, his voice dropping an octave to mask the tremor of uncertainty. "A standard seeding of the Avra strain. It should have reduced their world to a gray sludge within 3 rotations. Instead, the telemetry cut out 7 cycles ago. And now." "This," he gestured toward the screen where the red vector was growing larger. "This is not a warship, counselors. Our sensors cannot classify it. It radiates no heat. It emits no shielding frequencies. It is a void in the scan, a silhouette of absence. If the humans survived the biophage, they should be fleeing or sending a frantic plea for mercy. They should not be sending a single ship straight into the heart of the Dominion Fleet Command." The tactical display chimed a mournful tone, signaling that the object had crossed the final perimeter. The grand armadas of the Dominion, massive dreadnoughts bristling with plasma cannons and kinetic railguns, drifted listlessly in the object's wake. They hadn't fired a shot. Their crews were not dead. The bioscans showed them alive, but paralyzed, their systems locked down by an electronic warfare suite so advanced it felt less like hacking and more like a divine command to cease functioning. The atmosphere in the Synod grew toxic with panic suppressed by protocol. General Crox, a massive brute of a creature whose species was bred for the front lines, slammed a fist onto his console. "Cowardice!" he roared, though his eyes darted nervously to the ceiling as if expecting the roof to tear open. "The fleet commanders are incompetent. Why do they not engage? If this human ship relies on stealth, we bombard the entire sector. We burn the grid. We are the Dominion. We have consumed stars. We do not cower before a species that has not even colonized its own stellar neighbors fully. I say we launch the orbital platforms. Fire everything. Turn the space between here and the intruder into a wall of fire." His shouting did little to dispel the gloom. It only highlighted the desperation. The Dominion had never fought a defensive war. Their history was one of expansion, of eating, of assimilating weaker civilizations through overwhelming force or insidious biological warfare. They did not know how to react to an enemy that walked through their gates without drawing a weapon. "We cannot fire, General." The cool, synthesized voice of the station intelligence, the prime logic, echoed through the chamber. The human vessel is not merely stealthy. It is projecting a localized field of quantum dampening. If we fire the plasma arrays, the magnetic bottles will fail instantly, detonating our own weapons within the barrels. If we launch kinetic missiles, their guidance chips will calcify. The intruder has not just jammed us. They have altered the local physics of our engagement zone. They are enforcing a ceasefire through the manipulation of fundamental constants. The silence that followed this announcement was profound. The prime logic was infallible, a construct of ancient code that managed the logistics of an empire spanning countless light years. For it to admit helplessness was akin to the stars themselves going out. Vok felt a cold shiver run down his spine, a sensation he hadn't felt since he was a hatchling in the dark nurseries of his homeworld. This was not war. This was something else. This was judgment. The red vector on the screen vanished, replaced by a live optical feed from the station's external cameras. The human ship hung there, filling the void. It was not the sleek, predatory aesthetic of the Dominion warships, nor was it the crude, blocky industrialism of the lesser races. It was a monstrosity of function, a colossal, asymmetrical spire of dark metal and exposed conduits, pulsating with a soft, blue Cherenkov glow. It looked like a refinery, a cathedral, and a tomb fused into one. It was scarred, pitted with micrometeoroid impacts, wearing its history like armor. There were no visible weapons ports, no glowing engine nacelles. It simply existed, a brutalist statement of endurance. As the camera zoomed in, the scale became apparent. The Dominion's flagship, a vessel the size of a city, drifted near the human ship's hull like a gnat beside a leviathan. The sheer mass of the human vessel was creating tidal stresses on the station's superstructure. The floor beneath the counselors' feet groaned as the station's stabilizers fought to compensate for the new gravitational body in their midst. "They are hailing us," the communications officer whispered, his voice cracking. "Audio only, wideband, it is. It is overriding the translation matrix. They are speaking High Gothic Dominion, but the syntax is archaic, formal." Vok straightened his robes, forcing himself to embody the dignity of his station. "Put it through," he commanded, though he wished he could flee to the deepest bunker in the core. The static on the speakers cleared instantly, replaced by a voice that was calm, deep, and terrifyingly devoid of malice. It was the voice of a being who did not need to shout to be heard. "This is Admiral Vance of the United Earth Reclamation Vessel Gravekeeper. We received your package. We found the contents indistinct. We have come to return the container and discuss the cleanup fees." The absurdity of the statement struck the council like a physical blow. Cleanup fees. They had sent a weapon of mass destruction, a biological horror designed to eat the flesh off the bones of billions, and the humans were treating it like a misdirected parcel. "This is High Exarch Vok of the Dominion," Vok replied, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "You have violated our sovereign space. You have incapacitated our fleet. You threaten the High Synod. Speak plainly, human. If you have come to surrender, do so. If you have come to die, we will oblige you, despite your trickery." It was a bluff, a hollow shell of bravado, and Vok knew the human admiral could hear the fear dripping from every syllable. "Surrender is a concept for combatants, High Exarch," the voice of Admiral Vance returned, smooth and unyielding. "We are not combatants. We are waste management. The device you sent to Saul, the Avarice engine, it was sloppy work. Unstable genetic coding, leaking containment fields. It made a mess of our outer dark. We had to quarantine the Uit cloud for 3 months. We are not here to fight you. We are here to bill you, and to ensure you do not litter in our driveway again." The lights in the chamber flickered, then dimmed to a blood-red emergency hue. "We are docking," Vance continued. "Do not resist. Resistance will be categorized as an additional hazard, and the surcharges are steep." A heavy thud reverberated through the hull of the station, shaking the counselors in their seats. The Gravekeeper had physically latched onto the station's primary docking umbilical, bypassing the magnetic clamps and forcing a hard seal. The audacity was paralyzing. In the history of the Dominion, no alien species had ever boarded the capital ring. It was the sacred heart of the Empire. "Security teams to the airlock!" General Crox screamed, pulling a disruptor pistol from his belt. "They will not take this chamber. Slaughter them in the corridors." The Prime Logic spoke again, its tone strangely flat. "General, the security teams are unable to deploy. Their armor servos have locked. The environmental systems in the docking sector have been flushed with a soporific gas mixture. The humans are advancing without opposition. They are not carrying weapons." The great doors of the Synod chamber, blast-proof slabs of durasteel designed to withstand a fusion charge, began to groan. They were not being blown apart. They were being pried open, slowly, methodically, by a force that sounded like grinding tectonic plates. Sparks showered down as the locking mechanism screamed in protest and then sheared off. The doors parted. There was no smoke, no explosion, no charge of screaming Marines. Instead, a single figure walked through the gap. He was flanked by two machines, bipedal automata that looked less like soldiers and more like industrial loaders, painted in hazard yellow and scuffed with the wear of heavy labor. The human, Admiral Vance, was an older male, his hair white and cropped close, his face lined with the deep grooves of a life spent in the void. He wore a uniform that was utilitarian, gray and unadorned save for a small patch on the shoulder depicting a green leaf over a stylized skull. He held a datapad in one hand and walked with a cane, though he moved with a fluid grace that suggested the cane was more for affectation or sensor concealment than support. He stopped in the center of the room, looking up at the high dais where Vach and the counselors cowered. The silence stretched, agonizingly long. Vance looked around the chamber, noting the opulence, the terrified faces of the alien overlords, the grand tactical displays showing his ship dwarfing their fleet. He did not look impressed. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been called into work on his day off to fix a plumbing issue caused by a negligent tenant. "High Exarch Vach," Vance said, his voice unamplified yet carrying clearly to the furthest reaches of the hall. "We need to talk about your waste disposal protocols." Vach stood, his four hands shaking. You mock us, you destroy our defenses, humiliate our fleet, and walk into our sanctuary to talk of waste. You are a conqueror playing games. Where is your army? Where is the retribution for the weapon we sent?" Vach's mind was racing, trying to find an angle, a weakness. Humans were supposed to be emotional, volatile, prone to rage. If he could provoke this human, perhaps he would make a mistake. Vance sighed, tapping the datapad. "Retribution? You misunderstand the nature of humanity, Exarch. We evolved on a death world. We spent our infancy fighting predators, fighting the weather, fighting each other. We got very good at it, too good. We nearly wiped ourselves out 3 times before we figured out the math. War is inefficient. It is an entropy sink. It burns resources that cannot be recovered. When we finally left our gravity well, we made a collective decision. We would not be warriors anymore. We would be gardeners, builders, curators." He stepped closer to the dais. "The weapon you sent, the bomb to eat, as your logs call it. It was a biological dismantling swarm. It was designed to turn biomass into sludge, crude, inelegant. When it hit our perimeter, we didn't shoot it, we didn't blow it up, we caught it." The holographic display in the center of the room changed, overridden by the datapad in Vance's hand. It showed the human solar system. It showed the massive, terrifying swarm of the alien weapon entering the outer system. And then it showed the Gravekeeper and a fleet of similar industrial ships moving to intercept. They deployed vast nets of electromagnetic energy, funnels of gravity that corralled the swarm. They didn't destroy it. They fed it. They fed it asteroids, toxic waste, radioactive debris from their own industrial past. The display showed the swarm changing, mutating under the guidance of human cybernetics. The red cloud turned green, then gold. It stopped consuming to destroy and began consuming to build. It knitted the asteroids together. It purified the radiation. It built a ring of habitation stations around the outer planets in weeks, doing work that would have taken human construction crews centuries. "You sent us a labor force," Vance said, a dry smile touching his lips. "We thank you for the donation. The Avarice strain is quite effective at breaking down heavy isotopes once you tweak the inhibitor codons. We've used it to terraform Mars ahead of schedule. However," his face hardened, the smile vanishing like a ghost, "the delivery method was unacceptable. You endangered a civilian population. You violated the isolation protocols of a developing species. And judging by the archives we downloaded from your mainframe while we were docking, this is your standard operating procedure. You eat worlds." Vach stared at the hologram, his mind unable to comprehend the scale of the reversal. They had weaponized the weapon. They had taken the ultimate instrument of destruction and turned it into a trowel. "Impossible," whispered General Crox. "The Avarice strain is unstoppable. It consumes all organic matter. It cannot be tamed." "Everything is a tool if you have the right gloves," Vance replied softly. "And we have very thick gloves. You see, High Exarch, we are not underestimated because we are weak. We are underestimated because we are quiet. You look at the galaxy as a hunting ground. We look at it as a garden. And in a garden there are weeds. There are pests." He looked at the council, his gaze sweeping over them with a chilling, clinical detachment. "We debated what to do with you. The old instincts, the ones we suppress, wanted to burn your worlds, to send your own weapon back at you and watch you dissolve. But that would be wasteful. That would be adding to the entropy of the universe. So you have come to spare us? Ilara asked, hope fragile in her voice. We have come to prune, Vance corrected. The Gravekeeper is not a warship, but it is a dangerous ship. It carries the cure for your hunger. He gestured to the two machines behind him. They stepped forward, placing large metallic canisters on the floor of the chamber. Your culture is built on consumption. You expand because you think you must. You strip worlds because you lack the technology to sustain yourselves otherwise. You are a cancer, not a civilization, but cancer can be treated. What is in those canisters? Vok demanded, stepping back. Education, Vance said. Nanites, a variation of your own technology rewritten by our best engineers. If we release this into your station's ventilation, it will spread to your fleet, then to your worlds. It won't kill you. It won't hurt you, but it will adjust you. Adjust us? Vok was backed against his throne now. It will rewrite your gut flora to process synthetic nutrients efficiently. It will optimize your metabolic pathways so you don't need to consume nearly as much. And on a neurological level, it will dampen the aggression centers of your brains. It will make you content. It will make you calm. It will take away the hunger. Vance's voice was terrible in its kindness. You will no longer feel the need to eat the stars. You will stay within your borders. You will learn to recycle. You will learn to cultivate. You would lobotomize us, General Crocs roared, horror dawning. You would strip us of our nature. Your nature is to murder, Vance said, his voice hard as diamond. We are offering you a choice. We can leave now. We can release the magnetic constraints on your fleet, and then when you inevitably attack us again, we will not send the Gravekeeper. We will send the Eradicator. And they do not carry gardening tools. They do not reformat. They delete. Or you can accept the upgrade. You can accept the crushing response we promised. We crush your need for war. We crush your scarcity. We crush your ideology. The silence in the chamber was different now. It was not the silence of fear, but of profound philosophical vertigo. The aliens were facing a species that had mastered the art of war so thoroughly they had moved beyond it into a realm of weaponized benevolence. They were threatening to solve the Dominion's resource crisis by force. It was the ultimate insult to a warrior culture and the ultimate salvation for a dying one. Vok looked at the canister. He looked at the display showing the human ship, a vessel capable of rewriting reality, hovering over his home. He realized then that the humans were not just powerful, they were ancient in a way the Dominion was not. They had stared into the abyss of their own violence and survived. The Dominion was a child throwing a tantrum. The humans were the parents removing the dangerous toys. If we refuse, Vok asked, his voice barely a whisper. Vance shrugged. Then we leave, we establish a perimeter, and the next time a Dominion ship crosses into human space, it simply vanishes. We won't even bother to hail you. We will just clean up the mess. But I think you're smarter than that, Vok. I think you're tired of the constant expansion, the constant war, the constant fear that someone bigger will come along. Well, someone bigger has come along, and we brought snacks. The tension held for a long minute, a string pulled tight to the breaking point. Then slowly, Vok lowered his hands. He looked at Ilara, who nodded imperceptibly. He looked at Crocs, who was staring at his useless weapon with a look of defeat. The culture of the Dominion, built on strength, bowed before a greater strength, the strength of absolute control. Deploy the education, Vok said, slumping into his throne. We accept your terms, we accept the upgrade. Vance nodded, tapping a command into his data pad. The canisters hissed open, releasing a shimmering silver mist that began to drift through the air, entering the vents, spreading through the station. Good choice, Vance said. We'll leave a monitoring buoy to check on your progress. In a few generations, you might even be ready to join the Galactic Gardeners Association. The dues are reasonable. As the humans turned to leave, the mist swirling around their legs, Vok called out one last time. Admiral, you said you stopped the war because of the entropy, because of the math. Is that the only reason? Vance stopped at the shattered doors. He didn't turn around, but his posture stiffened slightly. The air in the room seemed to drop in temperature. No, the human said, his voice low. We stopped fighting each other because we looked further out, past the rim, past the halo stars. He turned his head slightly, revealing a profile etched in grim solemnity. We stopped making noise because we heard something listening in the dark, something that isn't like us, something that doesn't want a garden. It just wants to eat. Vance gestured to the open void beyond the viewport. Your bomb to eat was a firecracker, Vok, but it made noise. It drew attention. We are here to quiet you down, to fix your hunger so you don't wake the real devourer. We are building a wall, high Exarch, and we just conscripted you to help us carry the bricks. The humans walked out, disappearing into the corridors of the station they had conquered without firing a shot. Behind them, the High Synod sat in the swirling silver mist, no longer masters of the galaxy, but conscripts in a war they couldn't yet comprehend. The silence returned, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of preparation. The universe was vast and dark and full of terrors. But as Vok breathed in the metallic tang of the nanites, he felt a strange, alien sensation settling in his chest. For the first time in history, the Dominion was not alone. They had been tamed, yes, but they had been tamed by the only thing in the galaxy dangerous enough to protect them. Act 2 had begun in the hearts of the aliens, but Act 3 was waiting in the black space between the galaxies, where the stars were disappearing one by one, extinguished by a shadow that had finally found a meal worth waking for. The humans knew, and now the Dominion knew. The gardening was over. The fortification had begun. The Gravekeeper detached from the station, its engines flaring with a silent, blue light, pulling away to patrol the fence line of civilization, a lonely sentinel standing guard against the long night. The transition was slow, agonizingly so for the Dominion citizens. The nanites worked over weeks, not seconds. The aggression that fueled their society didn't vanish, it transmuted. The urge to conquer land became the urge to conquer engineering challenges. The biological imperative to hoard calories shifted into a drive to optimize energy grids. It was a cultural rewriting that was terrifying to behold. Statues of warlords were pulled down, not by angry mobs, but by efficient civic planning committees who needed the metal for orbital elevators. The crushing response the humans had delivered was total cultural victory. They hadn't defeated the Dominion military, they had made it obsolete. But amidst this forced renaissance, the words of Admiral Vance festered in Vok's mind, something listening in the dark. 3 months after the visitation, as it was now called, Vok requested a private summit with the human liaison. He was granted an audience not on the station, but aboard a new construction at the edge of the system, a massive sensor array the humans were helping them build. Vok, now leaner, his eyes clearer, no longer driven by the gnawing hunger of his species, stood beside a human scientist named Dr. Aris. "The array is operational?" Vok asked, his voice smooth, devoid of the growling bass he used to affect. "It is," Aris replied, looking at the readouts. "It's a subspace interferometry telescope. It looks for gravity wakes, deep ones." "Show me," Vok commanded. "Show me what the Admiral spoke of." Aris hesitated, then keyed a sequence. The main view screen, a window into the soul of the universe, shifted focus. It looked past the local stars, past the nebulae, out into the intergalactic void. There, in the darkness where nothing should be, were scars. Massive, trailing wakes of gravitational turbulence, invisible to normal optical sensors but screaming loud and clear on the new array. They were tracks, footprints. What made those?" Vok asked, feeling a primal fear that the nanites could not suppress. "We call them the Mycota," Aris said softly. "Not a ship, not an organism, a macrostructure, a hive mind of biological machines the size of solar systems. They move from galaxy to galaxy. They don't just strip the biosphere, they process the stars themselves. They harvest the fusion layers." He pointed to a patch of darkness in the distance. "That used to be the Andromeda dwarf galaxy. It's gone, processed. They are heading here. They were drawn by the radio burst of your wars, and specifically, the specific resonance of the Avarice engine. It smells like food to them." Vok stared at the abyss. The crushing response of the humans made perfect sense now. They weren't arrogant gods, they were terrified engineers trying to reinforce the hull of a sinking ship. The bomb to eat the Dominion sent had been a dinner bell. "So the Alliance," Vok said, "the gardening, it is all preparation." "Yes," Aris said. "We can't fight the Mycota with lasers, we can't fight them with plasma, they feed on energy. The only way to stop them is to starve them, to create dead zones, or to create something they cannot digest." "And what is that?" "Us," Aris said, looking at Vok with a grim intensity. "A unified galactic civilization, integrated with synthetic biology, capable of manipulating the fundamental constants of physics. We aren't building a wall, Vok. We are turning this galaxy into a poison pill. When they take a bite of the Milky Way, we want them to choke." Vok looked back at the screen at the tracks of the cosmic predator. He looked at his own hands, now steady, capable of building rather than breaking. He understood the scope of the human game. It was a gamble of cosmic proportions. "Then we have work to do," Vok said. "The Dominion, no, the Coalition, stands ready. We have many ships to retrofit, and I believe I know where we can find more raw materials." "Oh," Aris asked. Yes, Vox smiled, a true smile this time. We sent other probes to other sectors. If we hurry, we can intercept them. We can bring the others into the fold before the darkness arrives. The scene pulled back, leaving the two figures silhouetted against the backdrop of the starfield. The camera drifted out through the hull of the station, past the human cruiser Gravekeeper, past the reformed Dominion fleet, accelerating away from the galactic plane. It soared higher and faster until the galaxy was a spiraling disk of light in the dark. And there, at the very edge of the frame, in the deep black, a shadow moved. It was vast, formless, and hungry. But down in the spiral, tiny lights were blinking, synchronizing, changing color from the chaotic red of war to the unified blue of a shield. The humans had not just attacked with a dangerous ship, they had ignited a beacon of defiance. The bomb had been eaten. The response had been crushing. And now, the real war for the future of existence was about to begin. The galaxy held its breath, unified at last, waiting for the first bite. The screen faded to black, leaving only the sound of a single, steady heartbeat. The heartbeat of a united galaxy, ready to fight for the right to exist.